Comes with an incredible story to tell all of you. Please give her a very warm welcome. Thank you for being here so much.
Hi, everybody. All right, first, let's start with a show of hands. Who here has heard the word transgender before? I had a feeling. I'm not going to call on anybody, and if you don't want to raise your hand, you don't have to. But the next thing I'd like to see is how many people here know somebody, doesn't have to be somebody close, could just be somebody you know at school, but they're not necessarily your friend, who identifies as transgender. Okay, that's kind of what I thought. So, and then probably people who didn't feel comfortable raising their hand too. So I used to be transgender, and I thought that I was a boy. So I'm going to share my whole story today. But first of all, I'd like all of you to grab one of the hymnals from your pews and go to page, is it 322? 322. That should be the small catechism. We're going to look at the Apostles' Creed. And I'll read it to you. We don't have to all read it together. I just need my podium. I actually do have it memorized, but we're just going to make sure that I get it word for word because this is really important. So we're going to go first article, okay? When we say, I believe in God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, what does that mean? What are we confessing when we say that? And I'll read it. If you guys want to read along, you can. I believe that God has made me and all creatures, that he's given me my body and soul, eyes, ears, all my members, my reason, and all my senses, and still takes care of them. God gives us all of ourselves. He gives us our bodies. He gives us our souls. And sometimes the world likes to tell us, well, your body's not that important, right? What matters is your mind or your soul or how you feel. But we just read, what does God do for us? He gives us our bodies. We are incarnate beings, body and soul. That's what that means. And then we go on. I think I'm still going to read from Article 1, but I'm not going to read the whole thing. Don't worry. He also gives me clothing and shoes, food, drink, house, home, wife, children, land, animals, and all that I have. He richly and daily provides me with all that I need to support this body and life. He gives us everything. And a lot of you guys, you don't have children yet. You're teenagers. But what does he give you, if not children just yet? A mom, a dad, brothers and sisters. He's giving you these vocations. You are a daughter or a son or a brother or a sister. You're a cousin, a niece, a nephew, all these different things. He's giving us all of these vocations. He's giving us our entire identity. He tells us what it is. And the most important identity that God gives to you is as his baptized child. When we start to walk away from that and not care about it so much, like what I did, and I'll tell you all about it, we see that a lot of things can go wrong. And then we go on to confess. I'm going to just jump down quickly since we just did it in the sermon. I loved it, and I was already planning on mentioning it. But second article. I'm just going to skip to the second paragraph right at the top there at page 323. Who has redeemed me, a lost and condemned person, purchased and won me from all sins, from death, and from the power of the devil, not with gold or silver, but with his holy, precious blood and with his innocent suffering and death. So God makes us, redeems us, sanctifies us. He gives us everything. But how often, even if none of us are transgender, it's okay. How often do we wish that we weren't born into certain circumstances? We wish that we had different parents, different siblings, a different body, maybe a healthier body, maybe just a smaller nose, whatever you're struggling with. A lot of times we wish that God had given us, sorry if I'm too loud, I'll hold it down here. We wish that God had given us something different than the gifts that he did give to us. And that's exactly what happened with me. When I was about 15, so around your age, a little younger, a little older than some of you, I stopped caring at all about my baptism. I was raised in a Christian family, infant baptism, all of it. And I just stopped caring about my baptism, stopped going to church. My whole family kind of fell away together. And weren't going to church on Sunday, weren't hearing the word of God. And just didn't think anything about baptism. Didn't really think it meant anything. Honestly, I didn't care if it did. I had no room in my life for God. And right around that time, as you can expect, I started going down some bad paths with different friend groups, with what I was looking at online, namely some influencers who were, following the LGBT lifestyles. And when I was 15 or 16, I started identifying myself as LGBT. Because I didn't care what God said about me. I didn't care who he made me to be. I started having a rotten attitude about everything that God had given me. I thought, well, I don't care if I'm baptized. I have a rotten attitude about my baptism, and everything else followed. Eventually, I started having a rotten attitude. I didn't want to be a daughter. I didn't want to listen to my parents. I didn't want to be a sister. I have a little sister. She's just annoying. Why would I want anything to do with that? And it got so bad that eventually I decided I don't even want to be a girl anymore. God, I probably didn't even say this, but God had given me this body, healthy body. I was always healthy growing up. And I just decided, I don't want it. You shouldn't have made me a girl. So I just had a rotten attitude about every single gift that God had given me, every piece of my identity, I hated. So what did I start to do when I was about 18? So older than you guys, but barely older than some of you. I went to a doctor, not a good doctor. Don't go to this doctor. But I went to a doctor, and I said, Doc, I'm not a girl. I'm actually a boy. I'm transgender. And the doctor, after years and years of medical school, said, oh, yeah, it makes sense. You're actually a boy. Wrote a referral for me to go ahead and start taking hormones, which would have been testosterone. That is the male hormone. What they have you do is they have you inject testosterone into your own body. It's a self-injection every single week. And that essentially puts you through this is for a woman. I was just a young woman. And it put me essentially through male puberty. My voice started getting deeper. I started having more muscle mass. I didn't grow at all. I was already my height that I was going to be. I was 18. I'm not getting any taller. But I was better at sports because I'm basically taking a steroid. So all this depression and anxiety that I was experiencing, I was so uncomfortable in myself, hated my female body, hated being a daughter, a sister, a niece, a granddaughter, everything. Even hated my baptism at one point. I'm finally getting the treatment that I think I need. The testosterone is numbing my emotions enough that I didn't have depression or anxiety or anything like that. And so what did I think? I thought, well, that must mean that this treatment is working. I go to everybody in my family, all my friends, and I say, hey, stop calling me Katie. Start calling me Caden, because that's a boy's name. Stop calling me she and her and all these things. Stop calling me your daughter. Call me he and him. Call me your son. To my sister, I said, call me your brother. And I loved every second of it. Every person in my life who went along with it, and most of them did, not knowing, this was a while ago, they went along with it. And all these people, oh yeah, you just be yourself. Find your truth. We'll call you he. We'll call you our son. We'll call you our grandson. All these things. My sister, I'll call you my brother. I didn't care if it was hurting my parents to go through that. I would have just yelled at them. My sister, when I was going through my transition, was 15. If she would have looked at me, and she probably wanted to, and said, hey, Katie, you've been my big sister my whole life. You've never been my brother. You can't take my sister from me. She would have been right, but I would have looked right back at her and said, get over it. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. And all you people need to fall in line. And when they did fall in line, and I was nice to them because they were making me happy, it felt great. It was the best feeling I'd ever had in my entire life, was when everybody else was bending over backwards to make me comfortable and to make me happy. I'm taking these hormones. People are calling me the pronouns that I want. And I just felt like I was on top of the world. But the whole time, what I didn't realize was that was actually the worst thing for me. That was actively harming me, getting me stuck in an ideology, making me reject my baptism every single day Because why would I want to be a baptized daughter of God? I don't want to be anybody's daughter. Wanted nothing to do with any of it. So anytime somebody wanted to push back, tell me, hey, Katie, this probably isn't good for you, tell them, my name is not Katie anymore. Do not use that name. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Told my parents they didn't have a daughter anymore. My grandparents, they don't have a granddaughter. And my sister, that her whole life, growing up with a big sister, it had just been a lie. I was really her brother all along. I mean, just imagine that. Imagine if you were in my shoes and you were to just look at your younger sibling and just say, yeah, your whole life is a lie. You don't really have an older brother or an older sister anymore. You never really did. Imagine the hurt in their eyes. Imagine you do the same thing to your parents. You look up at your parents and you say, you know the kid you raised? No, that's not really the kid you raised. I'm someone else. That's what I did to everybody in my life. And I'm sure my grandparents, when I first started doing that, my grandmother's probably looking at me in her 70s thinking, what is going on? Am I going to die having to call my granddaughter my grandson? A lot of hurt I put people through. A lot of hurt. And the whole way down, it didn't hurt me. Didn't hurt me one bit. It actually felt like I was cured of depression, of anxiety, that I was just king of the world, and I could never crash down from that. So I continued with my transition for about, that's what you call it, transition, when you're actively taking these hormones. I continued with that for about 7 years. Went so far as to have my healthy breasts and uterus removed. Uterus would be your womb where you hold a baby. As you get older, you get married, you get pregnant. That's where your baby would sit. And had all that removed. Didn't want it anymore. Told the doctors I don't need it anymore. And the doctors went ahead, just got rid of all of it. Told them I am never going to change my mind. I'm never going to go back to being a woman. I have no interest. Until one day, felt like the worst day of my life. Had a lot of worst days of my life. I went for just my regular haircut appointment. And I just get my haircut. It was standard men's haircut. Okay, I go to a good barber shop. Everything's on the up and up. When I get back home, I look in the mirror, and I was just stuck looking at myself. And I couldn't quite place it at first. I'm staring at my reflection. At this point, I had been taking the testosterone for 7 years. Had already had those surgeries that I mentioned to you. Wearing all men's clothing. Nobody thought that I was actually a woman. When I would tell my friends, guys, just so you know, I'm not really a man in the same way that you guys are. I'm transgender. They would think I was joking with them. But I'm looking in the mirror that day. And I just thought, oh my goodness. I look like a girl. Why do I look like a girl? Why am I seeing myself as a girl right now? For 7 years, other people can't even see me as a girl, and all of a sudden I am? I've not seen myself as a woman. I was 25, almost 26 maybe at the time. Maybe a little younger, I'm not too sure. But I mean, I'm looking in the mirror, and for the first time in my entire adult life, I think, I'm actually a woman, and I can see it. I've never been able to see that before. And I kind of realized everything I did to my family was for nothing, because I was wrong. I said, hey, I'm your son. No, I wasn't. I was so far detached from reality. I actually thought I was a man, and I actually told everybody in my life, if they say otherwise, they're wrong. No, I was wrong. I was wrong. I was dead wrong. And I kind of tried to shake the feeling, looking in the mirror and seeing myself as a woman. I just tried to, shake the feeling. I got to get to work. We're done with this nonsense of feeling like a woman. So I go to work, and by the time I come back home from work, I look in the mirror, and I still can only see myself as a woman. It was unbelievable. I hated it. It was the worst feeling I'd ever had, because all this work I'd put into my new identity, it was like I'd done nothing. It was like it made no difference, except that now I'm mutilated. I have scars across my chest. My voice will never change back to the way it was before. I'm always going to live like this. I will never be able to bear children. And those were some of the realities that were setting in for me at the time. And I'll tell you, I did not know what to do. And every single night, I would lie awake in bed, just crying. And I was still taking the testosterone, so it was hard to cry. I don't know why, just when you take testosterone, I guess it's a little bit more challenging to get yourself to cry. But I would be lying in bed just bawling, just wondering, what am I going to do? I was so wrong. Do I continue living this lie and just continue being this persona that I've created just because it's easy, just because I've already put all this effort into it? Or should I just go back to being Katie because now I know the truth? And it was every night for months, maybe even close to a year, that I was just laying in bed, couldn't fall asleep, would be up for hours, just plagued with these thoughts. I didn't even want to live anymore. I mean, I'd be driving home from work and just thinking, I would love to get in a car accident right now and just not survive and just not have to deal with this ever again. And that would just be it. And one night, when I was at just about the lowest I had ever fallen, and I really did not know what was going to happen, what I should do. I didn't even want to wake up the next day. It felt like I was falling off of a mountain, like off of a cliff. And I'm just free falling through the air. And I could just grasp onto anything just to stop me from falling like that. And all of a sudden, I remembered, it's like I grabbed onto a branch that could hold me. You're a baptized child of God. That's the thought that popped in my head. I'm baptized. Things are going to be okay. I have nothing else. My entire identity, this whole thing that I built up for myself, I created my whole identity apart from God's creation of me. All that just came crashing down in an instant. Except for one thing, my baptism. And in that moment, I kind of realized my baptism is the only thing I have left. It's the only thing that was left untouched by this whole transgender process. I changed my name legally. I changed it on my birth certificate. My license, I changed to say male instead of female. The state of Massachusetts, where I'm from, they changed my birth certificate for me. All my legal documents reflected my new identity. I had no women's clothing, only men's clothing. All of my, I don't know how to explain it, secondary sex characteristics. Those are the things you get from puberty. So for men, you'll get a lower voice. For girls, you get breasts. I'm sorry, it's awkward. But my secondary sex characteristics were gone. I just kind of felt like I had no gender. Felt like I had destroyed everything. My body didn't look super feminine, but it also didn't look super masculine. I felt like I was in between. Everything was gone. I couldn't just make one easy choice. Either way, whether I chose to stay Caden or to go back to being Katie, it was going to take a lot of work, and it was going to be a painful process. But the one thing that was not harmed at all was my baptism. And so that night, when I remembered that, when that thought popped into my head, you are a baptized child of God, I finally felt some peace. Okay, I can go to sleep, I can pick this up in the morning, and I can figure it out then. And it took a lot of work. I want to say the next day I resolved to never take the testosterone ever again and to not be Caden and all this stuff. That's not what happened, though. The next day I woke up and I thought, all right, should I be a man or I still thought I had a choice. You don't really have a choice in the matter, but still thought I had a choice. Am I going to go male or female? I'm kind of thinking about it, and I decided, all right, I'm going to very slowly go back to being Katie. Nobody will ever know, and we'll just leave it at that. So I start, slowly telling my friends, hey, maybe we'll just try the name Katie, see how I feel about it. Hated it. And I started reading the Bible again. I was following a Bible podcast, so I'd go into work. In my commute to work, I'd listen to the Bible podcast. And a lot of times, I would not make it past the creation narrative in Genesis. I would just keep coming back to that. And I was like, all right, yep. God creates the world. God created me. That's good. All right, let's back it up. I'll rewind the podcast, and we'll do the same thing tomorrow morning. A lot of times I couldn't make it much further than that, probably because that's just what I needed to hear. It took me a year or two, I think. I wish I had my timeline exact for you guys. It took me about a year or two to finally decide fully, yes, I'm going to go back to being female. Because I didn't know that being male was really bad. It was really wrong, that there was anything wrong with transition. So I'm reading the Bible, and I decide, you know what, I should probably go to church. Maybe that's a good idea. And I did. I went to a church in my neighborhood for confession and absolution it was a Roman Catholic church, so there was a priest there. And all that went fine. I was raised in the Roman Catholic Church, so it was a place I was familiar with. And then I started thinking, well, maybe I'll go to a different type of church. I don't know. So I start reading all about theology, and I stumble upon the Lutheran confession somehow and decided I'm actually going to go to a Lutheran church. And so I went to a Lutheran church just near my work, which was over the border in New Hampshire. And I sat down with the pastor. And this was when I pretty much resolved that I was going to detransition or reverse my transition to go back to living as a woman the way that God had created me. And so I'm sitting down with the pastor after I'd gone a few times, set up a meeting with him, and we just get around to chatting. He's telling me everything about the catechism, and I had already read it because I did all this research into the Lutheran confessions. About an hour and a half goes by of our initial meeting, and he asked me, is there anything else you'd like to talk about? And he thought that I was a young man coming into his office. And so I said, yeah, Pastor, there's one more thing I want to talk about. I'm actually a woman. I'm transgender. I don't want to be transgender anymore. And my pastor, great, wonderful pastor, says, let's schedule another meeting. So we scheduled another meeting and talked more about this transgender issue. And he very gently encouraged me through the detransition process, which first was, what I decided to do was stop getting haircuts and stop taking my testosterone, which was dangerous. When I had had my uterus or my womb removed, they took what's called ovaries. I don't know how many of you guys know any of this, but that produces your hormones as a woman, your estrogen. If you don't have that, your body's not going to produce an adequate amount of certain hormones. That is dangerous. You put yourself at risk for a lot of diseases. Because my body was not able to naturally produce hormones anymore, I need to take something. I need to take either estrogen or testosterone. But I decided I'm not going to take the testosterone. So then it was kind of a race to find a doctor who could prescribe the estrogen, which was a disaster. I went for about somewhere between 6 to 8 months with no hormones, knowing the risk I was putting myself in, but because I just could not take the testosterone, I just couldn't bring myself to do it, felt that I was actively sinning if I did it, and so I thought, you know what, I don't care what the consequences are, but I am not going to sustain my health with something that I think is actually bad for me, probably worse than just not having anything for a few months. But I ended up finding a doctor. My pastor helped me to find a doctor. And after that, it was letting my hair grow. And it was very short. And if any of you have ever gone from short hair to long hair, you know how awkward that in-between phase is, where you can't pull it back, you can't really do anything with it, and you just kind of have to live with it for about a month or so. Luckily, my hair grew fast enough that the time between the awkward phase, where it's in my eyes but I can't do anything, and being able to pull it back or clip it back or something, that was only 3 or 4 weeks. But that was rough. There were a lot of times I just wanted to pick up the clippers and just shave it off again. I was ready. I thought, all right, no. I can do this because it's not my strength, it's God's strength. And I'm just going to pray for the strength to be able to do this. And if I'm leaning on God, then I should be fine, okay? If I have Jesus in my court, then I'll be okay, even if my hair looks bad. And so that's kind of what I did. And I changed my phone screen. This is going to sound really corny. I don't even know if people do this anymore. But I changed my lock screen, my wallpaper, to be this bright pink with it was like baby shoes, very, very girl sort of thing. And it was Psalm 139, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. It was that whole thing. And I just had that on my phone. So every time that I was just done with this detransition, and I was just like, no, I'm just going to be a male because this is so much easier. I would look at my phone. I looked at my phone a lot, and I would see, okay, no, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm not going to destroy myself all over again. And after I kind of let my hair grow, and kind of during that process, it was time for me to start wearing women's clothing again. Now, this was one of the hardest things. The way that I'll say it sometimes is that I had to fully rewire my brain. If any of you have ever talked to a person who identifies as transgender, you'll know if you are not using the name and the pronouns and affirming how they'll say their transition, they can become hostile. You will really upset them. You will make them feel really bad about themselves. That's what was happening to me. I had to let myself just feel bad, feel very negatively, in order to grow. And sometimes that's what people need. I would have loved to just continue down the path I was on because that path was painless. The path I was on to come back from all the damage I had done, that was painful. That was a rough path. So what I had to do, because I could not bear to wear clothing, even a t-shirt that had the label of women's on it, I started with socks. I just went to the store and I just bought, or I might have gone to Amazon. I can't remember exactly now. But I went somewhere and I bought just a pair of women's socks. Nowhere on the socks did it say women's. They were your standard gray and white socks. You could have looked at them and not known whether or not they were men's or women's socks. But the package they came in, the sizing at least, was women's sizing. So I would wear these socks and I would feel horrible. I felt like everybody in the world could see that in my shoes, invisible to the rest of the world, that they would know that I was wearing women's socks because I knew I was wearing the women's socks. And I hated it. Hated every second of it. And when my pastor said, hey, I think maybe at church, we didn't say it quite like this, but at church, he encouraged me to start going by Katie instead of Caden. And I said, all right, I'll do it. And every Sunday I walk into church. I'm wearing the women's socks, nothing else, women's. I was wearing plenty else, but nothing else that was women's. So I got the women's socks on. I opened the door of the church, and everyone in the narthex, hey, Katie, not Caden, Katie. It was like fingernails on a chalkboard. It was absolutely the most uncomfortable I had ever been in my entire life. It was much more comfortable when everybody was just doing what I told them. Call me this. Don't call me this. Well, that was comfortable. But then when I would open the doors of the church and everybody would shout my birth name at me, well, I hated it. But sometimes in order to grow, you have to be a little bit uncomfortable. So I just went along with it. What I did was I just parked as far away from the church as I could every Sunday, and the whole walk over to the narthex door, I would just brace myself to hear that name that I hated so much, the name that I have not used in 7 years. And then after I kind of got over the socks and the name thing, because eventually the discomfort just wore off. So, oh yeah, well, that sucks, but I'll just deal with it. And then eventually it was like, yeah, that's just my name. I love it. My name's Katie. I'm used to it. Then I decided, well, maybe I can buy pants or t-shirts that are women's, but maybe they don't look like women's. And it only took about February to October of the same year, for me to go from I don't want to wear any women's clothing, I don't even know if I want to be a woman again, to I can now wear dresses and skirts to church. Because I made myself so uncomfortable. I forced everyone around me to, I don't care how much I beg you. I don't care how much I cry in front of you. I don't care how badly you just want me to be happy or you just want to make me feel good. I am not a man. Do not call me he. No matter how much I beg you, you call me she. Because that is what's best for a person who's confused. And that helped me to rewire, so to speak, my brain. And I was just normal after that. I just felt like, okay, yeah, I'm a woman. You know? I got enough damage on me that, you got scars and everything. Can't have kids. There's a lot to live with after that. But I finally felt like, all right, this is who I am. And the whole time, I was just always remembering my baptism. I always remember, I'm a baptized child of God. Just like how we read, God gives us our identity, and the most important thing is our baptism. There's one thing I want to mention, though, before we start doing questions, is social media. Because you guys are probably all a part of it in some way or another. For me, when I started going down the transgender path, I was watching a lot of influencers. For me, it was on YouTube. That was my social media of choice. I didn't post anything, but I would consume a lot of media. I don't know what it is now, if it's TikTok, if it's Instagram, I don't know. But I'm too old to know anymore. I don't need to know anymore. But whatever it is, the influencers, when I was on there, and I think it's the same now, they'll talk about their lifestyle as if that is the best lifestyle to possibly be living. For the transgender influencers, they would talk about starting on hormones and how it cured their depression. There was another thing that the influencers would do, and they would show how sad they were before going in for a surgery for the transgender things, and how happy they were coming out of surgery. And you watch that as somebody who's young or confused, and you're like, oh, well, I'm uncomfortable with my body because puberty is just so awkward. Maybe that's what I need. Maybe I need to go through with these things because it's making these people happy. No, they have to do that. They're influencers. They want to sell their lifestyle. That's how we get so many fad diets, and people do carnivore and vegan and all these different things, because people can sell it as if it's the best thing ever, and that's exactly what the influencers do, especially with the transgender stuff. So it's actually bad for people to go down that path. And when you're seeing things on social media, you just want to be able to question what you're seeing. This person's acting so happy because they started drinking matcha tea or something. It's like, well, maybe we can look up what are the side effects of drinking too much of one beverage. Things like that. So you just want to be skeptical of a lot of the influencers that we see, because without them, and without being so naive and falling for all these things, I probably would not have gone down the transgender path. And if any of you are influencers, well, you're doing a better job than I am, because I can't even keep up with any social media now. But just, I don't know, I just want to make the point that it's the social media influences that's where a lot of this stuff is going to come from. And a lot of this kind of just diving headfirst into transition is coming from because you see these people who you trust, they're going through it, and you think it's going to solve all your problems. Okay, so I think I'll leave it there. If you guys have any questions, you can raise your hand and ask me. And if you have any questions that also gives you facial hair. And for the most part, that has stopped for me, but sometimes I will still get enough facial hair that I'll need to shave in the morning. Like, men shave in the morning. That's what I have to do. The muscle mass, that increased muscle mass pretty much goes back down. I worked out enough while I had that I was able to sustain some, which is nice because I didn't want to go back to where I was before. I was like skinny and weak and everything. So being able to maintain a little bit of that was nice. But I have to work out to sustain it now. It doesn't just happen naturally. My voice, I think, used to be deeper and a little bit more coarse. And believe it or not, this is actually not as deep and a little bit softer than what it was when I was actively taking the testosterone. There are very high risks for cancer, things like osteoporosis when you're taking the testosterone, and those risks can go down after you stop, but they don't necessarily go back to where they were before because you were injecting, cross-sex hormones into your body every single week. So you're basically poisoning yourself. So you can only go back to normal so much. Some people who have not had surgeries are sterile anyway. Their reproductive system just won't work the same way as before. But the changes for me is mostly my voice. And if you ever hear people talk about the difference that testosterone has done, the changes that it's done to their voice, usually women will say after they've detransitioned, kind of like what I have thought, that it would go back to normal, that it was reversible, but it's not. And it's not just that I have a deeper voice. It's that my voice actually hurts. Not constantly, but it hurts enough that sometimes, some days, I just can't even participate in church because the hymns are just too much. And sometimes I will whisper them or I will hum them, but there is actually a certain amount of pain that's just kind of always there if I'm using my voice enough, and enough could just mean, a half hour a day, is things like that. Yeah, well, I won't be sore so much. Tomorrow I probably won't be too sore, but, we actually are going to sneak out before the prayer service tonight. But if we had more hymns to sing, I probably wouldn't be able to do it. I was starting to give out in this responsive prayer service that we just had. I was like, oh boy, I got to save my voice to talk. But so there's always that amount of pain. People who were singers before, they were told by the doctors, not good doctors again, but they were told by the doctors, you can still sing. You'll just maybe sing at a lower octave. That's not true. You can't sing anymore. You have no control over your voice. You just feel like a robot. It's just scratchy all the time. So that never changes. But a lot of the other things, maybe they don't go back to normal, but it's not as difficult to live with. Go ahead.
Aside from what you're doing today, have you had the opportunity to inspire anybody else who's maybe been in a similar situation as you?
So there is one person who I met in New Hampshire. I actually do this a lot, and usually what I aim to do is speak to parents, grandparents, siblings, aunts, uncles of people who are identifying as transgender, because a lot of times the transgender identified person will, if you don't use the pronouns, which you really shouldn't, or the name and any of that, they'll just cut you off because it's painful. And I know it's painful. It's the best thing for them to hear the truth, but it's painful. So they will a lot of times just cut the person off from their life if they're not kind of caving to every demand. So I like to talk to those people because for some reason that's all the people who are starting to come to hear me. But there is one gentleman, and he sticks with me. I reach out to him every now and then, who wanted to detransition, so go backwards with it, but didn't know how. I met him over in New Hampshire. And sometimes I just kind of text him and encourage him, and he's got quite the story. Everybody really does, and it's just been so hard for him that I hope that he is still sticking with it. Our conversations have been pretty brief, but I do worry about him and always hope that he's doing well. But I think for the most part, for inspiring people, it's not been so much the transgender identified people, it's been more parents where they're like, oh wait, my kid could come back from this? And I'm like, well, yeah, sure. We can all come back from sin. You know, Jesus loves all of us, so it's not like the promises are not for their child or that their baptism is not valid. So there's been more of that. Oh, they were fine with it. I think they were kind of shocked, felt a little bit guilty. This was something that I had to straighten out. So when I first said, I'm not going to be transgender anymore, my parents were blaming themselves for having gone along with it. And I mean, I just had to tell them because two things were true at the time. One, it was 2014 or 2015, and the whole Bruce Jenner thing had just come on the news, and everywhere they turned in the media, it was celebrated, the transgender stuff. Still, a lot of places in the media, it's celebrated. You walk into a school, and it's celebrated. And you have to affirm these things. So my parents did research, but all it brought back was like, yes, you should affirm your child. And so they were blaming themselves like they should have known better. But I think they did everything they could. And I also told them I was 18. It had nothing. They didn't sign off on a single thing. They didn't know better. I told them I'd done my research. They did their research, and everything seemed like it was okay. There was not other. If you Googled it, there was no, hey, transgenderism is bad. That's just not how it was set up. You'd always get the links that were about how transgenderism is good for people. And so you never really got the other side of it. So I think they kind of blame themselves, and I've had to straighten that out a few times. Like, no, let's not get into blaming each other, okay? That's not what we're going to do here. My sister, we've not really talked about the transition and detransition too much, but she was, I think, one of the first people I told that I didn't want to be a boy anymore, because I don't even remember what we were talking about. We were talking about something, and then I said, well, you know, like, she asked me what I don't like about the effects of, maybe it was the effects of testosterone. And I said, well, you know, everything. I don't like anything about this. And I said, I just want it all to be gone. And then she's like, huh, and just kept walking, because that was an in-passing conversation. And my grandparents were very happy that I was not going to continue down that path. They were very, very happy. More questions? Anyone? Go ahead. That is a really good question. So when you're interacting with someone face to face, you don't have to use pronouns, okay? So this is actually going to be a pretty long answer, so I'll try to make it very clear. You will not have to use the pronouns, because if I was talking to you, would I ask you a question and say like, hey, how was his day at work today? No, I would say, how was your day at work today? So you can kind of avoid the pronoun mess when you're just talking to a person. It is important as Christians that we don't make it seem like we're agreeing to something that we're not agreeing to. If you are asked directly, do you endorse transgenderism? You should be honest that you don't endorse transgenderism, but that a transgender identified person is a person, and that you can still love that person. But you don't have to love the sin that they're falling into. Now, if you say that, it's very likely that the person will then just cut you off, not want to have a conversation with you. That is pretty common. A lot of times when anything kind of seems a little bit Christian, they're able to put it off and just say, well, I don't need that in my life. And unfortunately, a lot of that is that there are online groups and online forums and discords and all these different things. People in those will talk about how hateful Christians are. So sometimes when anything even looks Christian, it can just kind of be like, oh, well, we just won't do anything with that because Christianity is bad, because that's what they've been fed. I mean, they're wrong, but that's what they've been fed a lot of times. So I would be clear when you have to be about where you stand, because you don't want somebody, you're not around, and they say, well, I have a friend who's a Christian, he fully supports me. He's like, well, no. I don't fully support what you're doing. I just love you. Okay, and I'm just civil with you, and I'm going to have a conversation with you. And if it's somebody who you're close enough to, it might be something, and I would pray about it. If you are very close to a person who identifies this way, I just kind of think, I love this person. I respect this person. I love them and respect them enough to tell them the truth. Should this truth come from me? Should I confront them and say, hey, listen, I love you. I don't want to see you hurt yourself with cross-sex hormones and surgeries and come out of this years and years later with all these medical conditions because of it. Whether or not you actually come to regret fully the transition, I don't want this for you. And so you'd have to figure out if that's a conversation that you should have, or if you just walk into Starbucks and the person behind the counter is transgender, are you just going to, yeah, hey, how's it going? And just don't use the pronouns and just be totally nice to the person because it's what a Starbucks worker deserves. You're just going to be nice to them. They're going to make your coffee and you're going to say, have a nice day and walk out. So it depends on your relationship to them, what your vocation is in these circumstances. If you have the opportunity, maybe somebody really, really trusts you and they identify as transgender and they come to you and they start talking about how they're feeling with all these different things. You can ask questions. You can ask these open-ended questions, I call them. Things like, well, what does it mean for you to be a man or a woman? If my friend comes to me and says, hey, I'm not a man anymore, I'm actually a woman, and he wants to be transgender, I say, oh, well, that's interesting. What does it mean for you to be a woman? And maybe I'd ask that. Well, what is it about womanhood that you desire? Oh, is there something about manhood that you despise? Those sorts of open-ended questions that kind of can keep a conversation going. You ask them in a neutral tone, you just kind of ask them. And the person could react in a number of ways. The person might react by saying, well, you have no right to this information. You don't ask me questions. You just go along. They could become hostile. But if it's a person you're having a conversation with like that, it's probably not going to happen. But let's say in some way or another, the person becomes a little hostile. Say, all right, well, you don't have to give me an answer. I was just asking. Your questions, whether or not they give you an answer, because you're not really owed an answer. You're just asking. Those kinds of questions can't be answered without leaving the trans ideology first, if that makes sense. And so those questions, because there's no clear answer for the trans person, is just kind of play in his head. What do I desire about womanhood? What does it mean for me to be a woman? And he's just thinking and thinking and thinking. And those are things that could pull him out of the transgender ideology eventually, hopefully. Other questions? Oh, go ahead. You got more?
How actually painful was it, to be the transition? Did you feel any physical pain, or was it more mental?
So, no, it was more mental pain. There's always going to be a little bit of physical pain because, going through all those medical procedures and everything. It was more mental pain because, I'm going to answer you quickly, and I'm going to go back to this. I know I was talking for a while on the one topic. It was more mental pain, and it felt like every single day something was wrong with me, and something was wrong with me. I was totally outside of what God had said, so I was the problem. But it was just like, oh my goodness, I'm wrong every single second of the day, and I'm just trying to fix this. I felt like everybody was looking at me. Nobody knew if I was a man or a woman. It was a whole thing. It was just the most uncomfortable I've ever been, and just the mental pain of going through that. That's what it was. What are you showing me?
2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 8 through 9. You might want to read that.
Okay. Okay. For this question?
No, for the one you were just...
Okay. All right.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to do it.
Hold on. Got a few trains of thought going here. So anyway, you can interact with the person civilly. You can pray about what's your vocation to the person, what's your relationship to the person, should certain truths come from you. What I would say is, if you can, okay, and it might be super uncomfortable, and it might just feel horrible. If you can, don't use the pronouns, don't use the name, use a nickname, term of endearment, buddy, you call your friend buddy, you say something like that. The pronouns and the name solidifies the transgender person into a false identity. The identity you want to affirm is an identity in Christ. That's the identity you should affirm, always. Is that Jesus loves you, Jesus died for you, you're baptized, that sort of thing. You always affirm that. But the pronouns, the identity God creates, you affirm. The identity the person creates, I would not affirm that. I would pray about it. Person in your life, kind of, what can we do here? Because I didn't change my name very much, Katie to Caden. So if somebody would have called me Kay, it's kind of in between. Are you affirming it? Are you not? I would just pray about it. Probably you're not if you're choosing a nickname. It's fine. But those are things that I would be super, super careful about. And I would not be afraid to ask very gentle questions that just gets a person thinking. What does the end of transition look like? That's another one. What does the end of transition look like? Because a lot of times people they will draw, if they're artistic. I am not artistic. But a person might draw a picture of some anime character. Okay? So me, if I could draw, maybe back when I was first going through the transition, I would have drawn this cartoon image of a man with maybe like a nice beard, probably 6 inches taller than I actually am, more muscle than I'll probably ever have, broader shoulders, thinner waist. I can never become that. So if somebody would have said, Katie, what does the end of transition look like? And I hold up that image, you're like, whoa, you have no idea what transition does. It doesn't do any of that stuff. Or if you say, how will you know when it's time to take the next step in transition? You don't know that either. You just kind of do it when it happens. You think, well, I don't know, right now it's just the hormones. Yeah, but how will you know when it's time for surgery? Well, I don't know. Because they don't have answers. So questions like that doesn't get you any answers. You won't have any more, but it'll get a person just thinking. And sometimes that's the best thing for them. Can they think outside of this ideology that they're seeing online for hours and hours a day? What are you going to read?
I was going to give that for you to read.
Oh, okay.
That might help.
All right, we're going back to how painful it was.
So, 2 Corinthians 8.
Can you read it for me?
Okay. For we do not want you to be unaware, brothers, of the affliction that we experienced in Asia. For we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt that we had received the sentence of death, but that was to make us rely not on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. Okay. The reason why that verse came to mind when you asked that question, and as you kind of heard Katie talking a bit about, should I stand up or should I? Okay.
That's my husband.
Hi. Yes, I'm Katie's husband. I'm Vicar Josiah Coblentz. This all originally started, as Katie kind of said, she was uncomfortable. I mean, who here likes to hear the sound of your voice when it's recorded? No. Oh, one. Right? Who here always is happy with what they see in the mirror? One, okay? And he's got great hair, so I don't blame him. What drives a lot of times people is there's this understanding that life is painful, and it shouldn't be. In many ways, it reminds me of my father had this old beat-up Dodge Caravan that, like, the door, it was a sliding door and it barely worked. And so you really had to get in front of it and slam it. And when you did, the interior would come flying and hit you in the face every single time. But if you put yourself where you're far enough away where it wouldn't hit you, you didn't have the leverage to do it. And that's kind of life. It's like either you're going to risk falling out of an open car or you're going to do the right thing and get smacked in the face. And people recognize that that's not how it's supposed to be. But because sin is in the world, there's always going to be pain. There's always going to be discomfort. And because of that, we try and find ways of avoiding it. We find other solutions. And we start saying, if it hurts, it must be wrong. If it was really good for me, if it was really true, then there wouldn't ever be pain involved. Well, this side of the resurrection, that's not going to work. The resurrection to come, that will be true. But until then, when you start living that way and you're focusing on pain, can someone name for me a sin? Yeah. What? Sloth. Okay, if I'm lazy, who is the most important person in the world for me? God. If I'm feeling lazy? Yeah, it's me. What's another sin? Greed. Okay, if I'm feeling greedy, who do I care about more than anyone else? Me. Same thing with lust. Same thing with envy. Same thing with all the 7 deadly sins. The focus is on me. What does pain make us look towards? When we make that the focus, it's on ourselves. But it doesn't have to be. That's what Paul was writing about in his letters when he was saying, we were in such great affliction that we thought we were going to die. And at that time, where was his hope? Was it in himself and in something that he could do? No. Turn to the one person who could raise from the dead. When you realize that you are in that bad a place, well, that's when you need that great a Savior. That's exactly what Katie experienced with her baptism. She was as low as you can go. And you know who was able to reach her in that place? Do you want to say, honey?
Jesus.
That's right. And that's all I wanted to say to kind of point to answer that question. Ezekiel? I wasn't going to, but then because now it's been brought up, I probably should. So one of my favorite verses in the Bible, or parts in the Bible, and I say that, and now I can't think of the specific verse, which really gives me a lot of credibility. But in Ezekiel 36, he talks about how I will sprinkle you with clean water, and I will remove the heart of stone from your, and give you a heart of flesh. And I'll scribe my law on it, and I will be your God, and you'll be my people. A lot of times we love to celebrate people who are like stones. Talk about Stonewall Jackson, or if you're old enough, you might remember that Chevy Silverado commercial, like a rock, We want to be stone-like. But that is exactly the kind of thing that also leads to us being dead. Because what is it that we admire in stones? They're unyielding. They're unchanging. Bad things happen to them, and they don't move. Neither do corpses. And that's a lot of the times, that's the best impression of a stone we can do. We don't get to be that strong. We don't get to be that unyielding. But we can go numb. And we have come to a place in our society where we will make ourselves numb and we'll call that health. It's like I can go out and I can sleep with a whole bunch of different people and never get married, and I don't even feel bad anymore. Look at how much more healthy I am than I was when I was first in the dating scene. And I was like, I want to be with you forever. Oh, that was so unhealthy of me. Now I don't hurt. I've made so much progress. That is, I want to be a stone, but all I can achieve is being dead. But God takes away that heart of stone, and he gives you a heart of flesh. And flesh hurts. It means that when you see people you love living in sin, it stings. When you realize that you yourself have been guilty of sin and that you've been hurting others, it stings. To be a Christian in this world does not mean that you get to experience less pain. It means that you're going to have more. But you always get to rely on somebody who will be strong for you. You don't get to go without any rock-like qualities. They're just not yours. You stand on Christ. He's the unmovable rock who, as much as the world buffets against you, will keep you firm and will never let you down. So you have that hope, Don't try to be your own Christ. Let him be your rock. And you can just trust him. And with all the feelings of joy that come with it, and also know that there will be all sorts of pains that you get to share with him too. So, all right, I'm done.
All right, I'm just going to say one more thing. Everybody grab a hymnal. I'm going to point you to one more thing. Go to hymn number 839. I'm not going to sing it. I'm not going to make you sing it. We're just going to read, well, I'll read it to you, that's fine. That second stanza of O Christ, our true and only light, hymn number 839. And the reason I'm going to read it to you is that it is as perfect an illustration in this hymnal that I can find that kind of reflects not only the transgender struggle in sin, but especially that, but not only that. Are we ready? Okay. Fill with the radiance of your grace the souls now lost in error's maze. Enlighten those whose inmost minds some dark delusion haunts and blinds. I love that. I love that. That is exactly what it's like when you're caught up in some lie of the world. And sometimes when people reach out to me, a lot of times parents, they say, hey, pray for my daughter. She's supposed to have surgery next week, that sort of thing. Sometimes if I have nothing else that I'm praying, I will pray that. Either for people who are transgender or really lost in any sin. It just happens to be that this is one that's central in my life that I sometimes am helping people with. And that one stanza sometimes. That was also my phone wallpaper for a time. Sometimes that is just my prayer. I mean, error's maze. That is what it feels like. It feels like you're lost in a maze and the dark delusion haunts and but I mean, that is just such a good picture of what it is like for the people who are stuck in that. And that's exactly what I pray for them. You don't have to. There are plenty of prayers in the hymnal. But that is one that I especially enjoy. So any last questions anybody has? Go ahead. We live in Wisconsin right now. Josiah is a seminarian, so he's on his vicarage. So we're going to move back to Indiana after 6 weeks in New Hampshire on a summer vicarage. We're going to move back to Indiana in August. So that's why when I introduced myself, I think yesterday, I was all over the map, or this morning. When was it? It was yesterday. Okay. Yeah, I said I'm all over the map, but we'll go with Wisconsin because that's where we drove here from. All right. Well, thank you guys.